I invite everybody to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I always wait for Commissioner Vigliotti to give me the hand signals, knows when I can stand and sit down. So I appreciate that,
All the efficiency of a mast.
always. So over the next hour or so, I think we have a pretty strong agenda to discuss. So I invite you collectively to be here this afternoon and remind our community that this is available now, along with will be I think via YouTube and available on our government channel afterwards. And as always, without speaking for you across the table, but I know for us, and I would expect for you as well, that we are responsive to the community. So if there's comments, thoughts, and ideas, please reach out. And I say, please reach out. I'm talking about our community itself, to reach out with these ideas. We have come a long ways in a relatively short period of time. And we have a long ways to go. As we're reminded during our budget, and we'll get into a lot of this in just a second, one of the elephants in the room is the establishment of our fire EMS as we're moving forward in the next fiscal year, but also in our out years. There's also a herd of elephants that happen to be in the same room dealing with our education. That wasn't there when we were talking about establishment of the fire EMS a handful of years ago. We should not have not expected for other things to occur, but this is something that is relatively large and is really right in front of us. So it's not this or that, but it's this and that, and how we're going to work all of it together as a team. So I really applaud the work that my colleagues have been doing, but also that the ESAC and the community has been doing in providing their thoughts and ideas, our relationship with our Board of Education and our legislators as we're moving forward, both in this specific topic, dealing with the ESAC, fire EMS and its growth, but then also other activities that are happening. The last administrative piece I just want to share, it's middle of June. Sometimes it's unbelievable to think. I know the older I get, it seems to be how time just keeps flying by, but we're in the middle of June. And, I am so proud that myself and colleagues have gone through already 6 months of our rotation. It's like rotation into a combat theater, rotation into a 4-year term, but also the work we're doing with all of our community players, our business, our legislators, and then also in August we have what is called our MACO Summer Conference, the Maryland Association of Counties. And a large topic, not large, I apologize, a significant topic to be discussed is always fire EMS and the advancement of process and procedures on moving forward with the communities and jurisdictions when it comes to fire EMS, on top of all of the other fun topics that are happening now. So again, I welcome you collectively. I welcome the community who's listening in. And at this time, I think it'd be appropriate if, why don't we go around the room, because there are new members, one, to be congratulated in your new roles, but then also what your roles and responsibilities are, and we'll also, I know my colleagues are maybe also new to some of you as well. So,
Thank you,
go from there.
And it has been since October since we sat down with the commissioners, and this is our first meeting with the new board. So we look forward to that, having this conversation today. My name is Rick Baker. I represent the southern end of the county stations, the Mount Airy Station, Sykesville, Amber, and Winfield stations, and I'm also the chair of ESAC. Go ahead and start with Lynn.
Hello, everybody. I'm on the tail end of serving on the ESAC as a citizen rep. I was also instrumental in putting together the ESAC as part of the work group as a former budget analyst with Carroll County. At the end of this month, my term is over, and I will not be renewing.
Dan Plunkard, the Central Region Rep. I represent the Reese Department, Westminster, New Windsor, and Pleasant Valley. I've been involved with this for a few years. I was on the original advisory committee that set up the bylaws and the foundation for ESAC. I'm in my second term as a member of ESAC.
Dan, one more time. Reese, Hampstead, and
Reese, Westminster, New Windsor, and Pleasant Valley. That's the
Reese,
central group.
New Windsor. Okay, thanks.
Familiar faces, but for the sake of process here. Michael Karolenko, I am the union career representative for the ESAC. I'm president of the Carroll County Professional Firefighters and Paramedics Association. I was previously a corporation employee in the county full-time, and more recently, as of March, I became a lieutenant with the Department of Fire and EMS, so I fill the role also as a defense representative to the ESAC per the bylaws. So,
Yep, and congratulations.
yes, sir, thank you very much.
Thank you. Linus Arcides, I'm Vice Chair of ESAC. My responsibilities, I represent the Route 30 corridor, the Hampstead, Manchester, Lyndborough. And it's a pleasure to be with you, gentlemen.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Mott. I am currently the president of the Carroll County Volunteer Emergency Services Association, and I represent all 14 companies.
Yes, you do.
Yes, I do. And I was also part of the advisory committee that put all of this together. Andrew?
Good afternoon. I'm Andrew Wooden. I go by Woody for those of you who may not know me. I am the newly elected chairman of FROPS, so the Fire Rescue Operations Committee. So myself and the other 13 chiefs, I'm the chief of Reese, come together, work directly with the fire chief, Chief Robinson himself, to help develop new policies and operations for the county. This is my first term here.
Bob Buckley, I am the representative for the non-union employees, and I am in the middle of my term.
Are they 4-year terms?
No, there are only two.
They're 2-year
Sorry.
terms. Okay, yep. Okay.
Actually, it's 1, 2, and 3. It varies among different members, so that's kind of a staggered.
Okay, cool. And who are you?
Michael Robinson, Director, comma Chief of Department of Fire and EMS, and ex officio member of ESAC.
Okay.
I'm Deb Effingham. I'm the Deputy County Administrator. It's a newly created position, and I'll be helping with Roberta with running operations.
Who needs a lot of help?
Yes, she does.
Okay.
She does, on all sorts of fronts. Roberta Wyndham, I'm the County Administrator.
Joe Vigliotti, District 1 Commissioner.
Kenny Kyler, District 2 Commissioner.
And again, Ed Rothschild, I'm District 5, down in Sykesville-Eldersburg.
Tom Gordon, District 3 Commissioner.
Mike Guerin, District 4 Commissioner and ex officio member of the ESAC.
So who is not
Now,
here?
I'd like to introduce Callie Williams in the back, who is the Executive Secretary of ESAC. Comes and keeps all the minutes and handouts, everything in line.
Okay.
So a couple folks, David Coe, he is the EMS Ops Chair. He is not with us. Dr. John Murphy is one of the other citizen reps, is not here.
Brett 6.
Blaine Wright is another citizen rep, is not here.
Dr. Stephanie Kemp.
Brett 6.
And Brett Six, who represents the Tawnytown, Harney, and Union Bridge departments, is not able to be with us today.
Okay.
And Dr. Kemp, their medical director, our ex officio member as well, non-voting member. So I think that's it.
Okay. Are there any questions on either our respective roles responsibilities, and that goes from you, that I'm looking in front of, but also to the gentleman to my right and left, if there's any. I mean, the best part about having these type of work groups, especially down here in the Reagan Room, is we're allowed to be candid.
Yeah.
And candidness is a really good thing, as we've come a long ways because of that. We had a couple of hiccups because I feel we weren't as candid as we could have been. And, we're blessed now with Chief being on board and having a very strong representative ESAC because of that, so.
I personally, when Commissioner Wance and now Commissioner Guerin were sitting on ESAC, it's been wonderful. I mean, Commissioner Guerin didn't have the background Commissioner Wance did. So he has taken the bull by the horns and he's learning how to be a firefighter. And he's learning all the terms and acronyms and things, and it's been great. I think another thing that has happened is that the individual fire department volunteer corporations have been reaching out to you guys more as we go through this transition, which I think is a wonderful thing as well, too. My opinion. Lennis, or anybody else have any comment on this?
You're going to take Commissioner Guerin through the training?
Well, we've talked about
Okay.
taking all five of you through the training.
Hey, I've been through it, at least in Anne Arundel County when I ran
Right.
Fort Meade.
Right.
They took me up the tower and stuff like that, and I had my own kit, and I'd go out probably every couple months. More for the food in the firehouse than the calls, but yes.
No, but we'd love to set that up for you guys sometime.
Yeah.
And Roberta, she'd want to play too.
I love it.
Okay.
One of the things that we want to try to do with our EMS chase cars, because they're running a lot of calls,
Yeah.
and you don't have to put on fire equipment, is schedule ride-alongs once we get ourselves established a little bit, get each of you out maybe for however long you want to ride for, run some calls, see what some incidents are like, and get a better familiarization with the system.
That's a great idea. We do it already with the Sheriff's Department, and that's been very successful. In a large part because we get to know our districts better and our community better, but also we have the opportunity again to get that candid conversation for the policeman or woman behind the wheel.
Sure.
And that goes a long ways. So, yeah, I appreciate that invitation and to find time in doing that. So,
We'll work on that. Getting right into, you guys all got a nice color copy thing of our strategic plan and all the objectives in there. I know you were all given a copy of the strategic plan when you first came into office. Callie and I sat down and we went through it, and we then went through it again with Chief Robinson just to see if he was on the same page as we were. And of those 159 objectives, 20% of them have been completed, and that was in January. Now, Callie and I will go through this exercise sometime this summer again, and we'll update this information for you all. But one of the things that we know that we got previously, before Chief Robinson, was what was the plan, and how are we going to attack and eat this big elephant that we're talking to the Department of Fire and EMS? And that was one of the first things that Chief Robinson did, was wanted to have a strategic planning day, and we did that, and we're following this plan to make sure that we're getting it right. I don't say getting it right, they're trying to give us some way of getting it there, but for the most part, I would say we're getting it right. The yellow ones are one that some work has been done to them, something's been touched with it, it's not complete yet, but it's work in progress. But I'm proud to say that 77% of them in January that have either been completed or there's been some touching or work that's been done on those. We still have a lot of work to do with some of the ones that are red, but I don't want to get into it page by page. We want to give you guys the information, let you digest it a little bit, and if you have questions, please come back and get with us. But the one thing that I want to talk about, and we'll talk about that a little bit more with the FY24 budget, is that of 34 of those 159 objectives, all have something to do with data or statistics. And that's why we were so strongly recommending that this data analyst get hired this fiscal year. So I'll just go ahead and start talking about FY24, unless you guys have some questions about just a quick look at the strategic plan.
is each one of the not categories, but specified objectives, they're not all equal. There's some that are much higher in a priority than others. So you have this broken down, but you have this broken down by priority?
We did not.
Okay.
We did not. We kind of prioritized them as we, myself, Bruce Fleming, who was a previous CC Vice President,
Right.
and Chief Robinson and I would sit down, and we was kind of like work through prioritizing. Chief, I'm not trying to speak for you, but, yeah.
Well, and the reason is because if you know what's prioritized, and you know if it's green, yellow, red, especially if it's yellow, red, you're applying additional resources or the appropriate resources necessary to get that
Right.
completed, as opposed to, here's the low-hanging fruit, it's not really the highest priority, and yeah, we can get away with it being yellow or red.
Yeah.
So,
Perfect example is the MOU. It
Okay.
took us for a long time to get through that.
Yep.
It took us a long time to get through that, but we got through that, and there was a lot of resources and time spent getting through that, as compared to
Right.
the organization chart beginning,
Yep.
for the new fire department. That didn't take quite as long. But there's things on there like the next steps that we've asked Dan Plunkett, who's leading the administration side of it, to start looking at next steps. What's this big department going to look like once we get it? We'll talk a little bit more of that, and we'll feed into that information later on in the conversation. As well as how are we looking at our budget, the fire department budget, and should we include some other things, and we'll talk about that in a couple minutes too. But you're absolutely right. We went through and prioritized them. You don't see the priorities there, but we discuss fairly regularly.
Okay.
Yeah, I think just to latch on to what Rick said, we use this plan actually as a template. We just broke out, ESAC just broke out into a subcommittee. We had some difficult decisions to make. And instead of being, subjective, we referred to this plan to make sure we're staying on task. Meaning here, and it ends up being a very good resource, regardless of whether it's red or green or yellow. If it's in there, it means we want to stick to the script. And we did that with some difficult decisions we've already tackled as in the subcommittees of ESAC. And again, just to reiterate what Rick said, if I had to give it a priority, what's our priority? It's in our first paragraph of our description, is we are desperately looking to have some sort of grasp on the budget, the overall, all of it. Because what we did in the past, we understood, but we don't really see how it all comes together yet moving forward in the future. And we're struggling with some sort of, to have our finger on that pulse and see where we're headed. Because, again, we advise, and we would love to.
I want to continue to be the group that comes with recommended requirements, or suggested requirements to the commissioners. I've said it before, and I'll continue to say it again, the requirement doesn't go away just because we don't have the money to do it.
that's right.
So we want to make sure that we continue to have the requirements documented so that we can continue to build this department the way we would like to see it suggested that it's being built. The ESAC meetings have been really interesting with some of the comments we're getting. It's great having the citizen reps on it, and the 3 citizen reps that we have right now have been huge in playing into the input of this, because we'll start talking in acronyms, and they'll bring us back and ground us to bring us back to show us how we're, to get them back involved in the conversation. But that part of it's been a very good thing. In this past week, I'm speaking for myself here, it's been awesome seeing the first group of county employees get into the fire stations. After all the years that a lot of us have put into this, waiting for this time to get here, it's been rewarding to see that we're seeing their work come together, and their joint work come together between county government and the volunteer corporations. But really looking forward to July 6th, when we get 3 more stations involved, as well as that paramedic car, 3rd paramedic car put in service. As we talked about earlier, with 21% of the objectives pertaining to data and statistics, the data analyst is going to be a huge addition to the Department of Fire and EMS. During your budget discussions, I noticed and listened to while you guys were debating it, whether or not to hire this person or put this, fund this position. And there's, one of the questions came up, well, we're just starting out. Do we really need to have this data person right now? Now is the time to have this data person, so that we can develop a baseline, so we can start getting performance data and metrics that we can then go ahead and start being able to see where we have shortfalls, or see where we have a lot, or see where we're over, doing something in an area, maybe we should be able to reallocate resources someplace else. So I think it's imperative that this person be hired as soon into July as we can, that we can get them. Anybody else want to talk about data? I know this is my pet peeve, and everybody kind of rolls their eyes when I
For
want to
that
start talking about
position, is
data.
there a specific job description already written and what they'll be doing?
There has been job descriptions that we have been looking at from other jurisdictions. And Chief Robinson has been working with ESAC and members of ESAC to make sure that, we're going to
How
get
you
the
want
right-
to tweak it to your
Absolutely.
thing?
Yeah, tweak it to
And
make
to
it work.
answer that with our new Vista HR management system, all the position descriptions go into that system, and there's certain parameters. So we've been working with the personnel analyst, Lori, and we're going to be sitting down with her one day soon in the midst of all the other positions she's working on, and we're going to start inputting some of those things. And the way that, once the data gets inputted, it comes up with certain parameters based on overall county positions. So we're still doing a little bit of research, because when you say the word data analyst, it's really all over the place, from a very technically focused level to more of a managerial and administrative. And what we look at, we have our first issue in the department right now is getting data, because each of the 14 departments, each of them is their own silo. So we have no way to even collate data that's being inputted in. Some of that we've already made progress because we've taken over the billing, so the EMS data comes in, but we've got to have everything coming into one area. So that person first has to technically get it all together, and then we need to set parameters and benchmarks as to what we want to measure. So we will be able to look at what is our efficiency, what's the cost effectiveness, do we need 20 of these types of units, or do we need only 10? Do we need to expand? And looks at the staffing models, and we'll look at quality improvement from there. So working with Rick and the rest of ESAC, we're getting input, and we've got a lot of people within the county. For example, Chief Wooden over here, he's a lieutenant from Montgomery County, so he certainly brings a lot of high-end technical type things to the table. Linus is an acting chief at BWI Fire Department. Danny's retired captain from Baltimore County. So we've got a lot of people with a lot of backgrounds from other areas that we can look at their best practices and try to put forward to this.
Yeah, because it's got to be hard, and even the strategic plan, it's like a living, breathing document that's always changing as you, get certain things done and decide priorities, like you said, and the job descriptions and all that. It's a lot of moving parts.
It's interesting to see that a lot of our neighboring departments are also hiring data people also, or information management people as well. So there's lots, I flood Commissioner Guerin's inbox with articles about data in the fire department, and now everybody is trying to do data-driven decisions instead of just, this is what we think we need to do.
And data's not new. I mean, MIMS has been using data for years as to cardiac arrests and all the other things that we appreciate every day. Data is what drives grants so that we can get training, we can get fundraising, we can buy equipment. So data is a huge part, whether you, in this entire picture. You've got to have that information to be able to base your decisions on. And right now, unfortunately, we can't get that data, starting with the fact that we're 14 different companies, and we need to bring all that data together so that we can all come together and make the right decisions.
The last thing I'll say is that It's not just internally as an organization. Chiefs talked about terms like community paramedicine. That's where we start. It's a non-traditional way of taking care of our community. And a lot of data will then be shared with agencies like the health department to take care of our citizens on a much different level than just responding to their emergencies. We mine that data through, EMS uses a term called Nemesis. It's over 500 data points that can be mined and shared with other public health agencies. So it will be integrated. This person will be collaborating with other agencies within the county to administer certain types of functions. And good stuff. Community paramedicine is good stuff, and I believe that's on the chief's short list of something he would like to begin to consider offering this county.
So when is the scope of work going to be put out there? When's the position going to be put out there?
We're hoping to be able to advertise sometime in early July, once I get it through HR, and they're obviously the determinant of that. You've got to have the physician specs and the class and the salary and everything established, so then there'll probably be about a 3-week window for advertising. Then we'll have to set up an interview process, and we'll probably ask someone from ESAC to be involved in that interview process, and we'll narrow it down to the candidates, and we'll make a selection. So I would gather to say probably within, I'm hoping, 2 months once the budget goes into play. I mean, we can certainly do everything we can to ready the position prior to
Right.
the July date. So we hope to have things in hand, and we're only 3 weeks away from that and in the midst of the whole hiring process, but that doesn't slow us down. So we hope to have something ready to go, and maybe by August we'll be advertising and ready to hire. And I would say realistically, it might be September before somebody comes
Right,
on board. But
right.
if we cut off some days from that, we'll certainly try.
Just take the word hope out of it and make it happen.
Yeah.
So we're looking at September.
Yeah, realistically, I would think,
Yeah. Okay.
to do it the right way. And
Sure.
again, we want to make sure we're consistent with all the things from
Sure.
the Siegel study in terms of the recommendations, and I'm sure there'll be some discussion as to where the classification will fall in. But I'm looking probably at somebody who's what I'll call a mid-range employee in all of our salary scales, someone with a degree or equivalent experience, those types of things that step out. And, the challenge is right now in that field, as most of everybody in this room knows, is the competition for these positions is very keen. So we're
Sure.
going to work with places like McDaniel and community college to see what kind of people they're turning out and see what the skill sets are and the competencies.
So are you looking to hire somebody who's, coming out of school, or are you trying to find somebody who has...
Well, I'd like to find somebody that has all the above. The other thing is among our 1,000 volunteers, the skill sets we have, we've got people that are rocket scientists and doctors and lawyers, and we don't know if there's someone in that group that may have a skill set that we may be looking for. So certainly if we could engage someone, even if they're not from Carroll County, but that has a fire service background, that would be even more helpful. But we're going to have to line up the very specifics of the position description. But I think there's a good pool of talented people. And so it could be someone right out of college that's on the cusp of what's there. It may be that this position, depending on how we get it classified, I don't want it to be a rotating door, but it's understandable that we might get a gung-ho 26-year-old master's degree, comes here, develops their skill set even more, and it's a transient position. But if we get a partnership possibly with a school, then we might, have a steady supply of those people. But we're looking for somebody hopefully with some longevity. That would be our goal.
Thank you.
So as excited as I am about FY20, the end of FY23 and the beginning in FY24, FY24 is going to be a very difficult year for the fire service in the county. Challenge is going to be with the 7 stations that are still without full-time county employees. The challenge is going to be with the 40 people that we're still short in the hiring process. I have all the confidence in the world, and I think we do too, that Chief Robinson is doing everything the best he has to mitigate that situation. However, once we started the hiring process and we started taking people out of the 7 stations that aren't staffed yet, It's hard for those corporations to manage that. And there has been steps that have been suggested from Lieutenant Karolinko and working with CC Visa to list on the Visa webpage now information that will take people who are interested in still working part-time or even full-time for one of the corporations to see where those openings are still at. It's basically just a roadmap to show where the vacancies are for people that are interested to do that. Sue, I didn't know if you wanted to mention anything more about that, or if that about sums it up, or?
It pretty well sums it up. It's working actually really well. We set it out so that originally we wanted to make it an à la carte kind of thing, but then they decided that they would have our liaison, Richard Kuntz, to be the middleman. And so if a station is looking for someone, that information goes out, and then the people that did not get hired into the system and that are available are picking up those positions. So it seems to be working.
What is the current vacancy rate across?
For the county employees or for the volunteer stations, the
For the
corporations?
volunteer stations?
I can't answer that question. I don't know if any of us here could answer that question.
I mean, we could tell you for our own stations, but I cannot tell you.
But we can tell you that if you listen to the radio, there's multiple units being dispatched because
yeah.
units are short-staffed at those stations now.
So there's no value in maintaining a current, the currency of vacancies across the stations? I mean, I know you have a system that when a call comes in, if one can't pick up, another one will. But, how do we know, we being you, to fill certain houses over others?
So that's what that program is doing. So
Okay,
if for
okay.
so I'll pick on my
Yeah,
station, Pleasant
yeah,
Valley.
okay.
So Pleasant Valley knows, we do our calendars, a month calendar, and we can see what the blocks of space are where we used to have employees, where we do not have
Right.
anymore. Pleasant Valley contacts Richard. Richard puts it out on, there's a spreadsheet that's out there.
Yeah.
So I'll pick on Bob, picks up, logs in, looks at it and goes, oh, look, I can pick up Manchester on that day, I can pick up the Valley on this day, I can pick up
Okay.
those, and then they can contact those companies then can absorb them in, because they're already career here in the county. So they have the physicals, they have the licensure and the skills to be out there. So that's how it's working. Now, unfortunately, there's still holes.
Sure,
There are still holes.
right.
The day-to-day is much more challenging.
It is.
Than
Yeah.
filling the
Right.
positions.
The other
And
thing that
we're working on that.
we've been doing since we hired the lieutenants back in March, all during their tenure at the academy, preparing and hiring people, where we've had extra people available, particularly as paramedics, we've been staffing stations that aren't even on board budgetarily to be staffed. So we've sent people, prior to Westminster cutting over, we've sent paramedics to Westminster, to Sykesville,
Right.
to other
Tony Town.
stations. And after July the 6th hiring, we will still have some of our floaters. We've got 24 floaters programmed into the system, 6 on each shift. So with those people, if everyone is working at the stations we've staffed, those 6 extra bodies are available to the 7 companies that won't be staffed till next year. So, for example, if Lineborough needed a paramedic, they'll call our shift commander in advance, and if we have somebody extra that day, Lineborough can't find one to hire, we'll provide a county person there rather than have that unit fail. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that every person that we have on the payroll is being utilized every 24-hour shift. And that's offsetting the critical staffing needs of these stations. And when we have extra people and the volunteer stations don't need them, then we're upstaffing equipment.
Right.
So we have the ability to put in at least two or three additional ambulances or medic units each day, or upstaff the fire staffing. So everyone is getting utilized. The challenge we're having is, and our problem is not a Carroll County problem. Baltimore Sun on 2 Sundays ago, front page was Baltimore City Fire Department and their staffing challenges. So
Right.
it's a national problem. That's one of the things at MACO we're attempting to have a fire chiefs affiliate Mako.
Good.
And so we're going to have some speakers and going to do our own programming at the Mako conference in
Great.
August.
Okay.
And try to approach it statewide. The legislature also passed to have a commission for summer study to look at the whole issue of not just career recruitment and retention, but also volunteer recruitment and retention. So it's a national issue, and we're going to be hiring starting maybe Friday, but definitely by Sunday. We're going to be advertising again for 1 month for all 4 of our positions, firefighter, EMT, paramedic, paramedic firefighter, and driver operator. That's going to be out there for a month. I'm going to be going to the Maryland State Fire Association conference on Sunday, and for 3 days we have a recruitment booth there. So we're going to have on the spot, but we'll be able to go right to the website, apply from there. We'll have information that's out, and we also went around to 3 of the paramedic programs in the area and spoke to their graduating class. We got interest emails, and we've reached out to them that have since done their national testing and told them, here's the positions if you're interested, come and apply this week. So we're pretty active on the recruitment. First day of work last week, we challenged everybody in the group of 71 that we hired to go out, and if each one of them would reach out to one person who's qualified, that would resolve our hiring issues pretty quickly. So that's our goal, is to try to fill those positions as soon as we can.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're not going to lower our standards. I think we've got pretty well-established standards. I think now that we have all these ambassadors in place, they are the spokespeople, and some of them were the biggest naysayers of what we were doing. Now they're all buying into the program, and they're gonna do well for our marketing. So we are seeing some progress in the area, we hope.
Okay.
And we're
Thanks.
also hoping that FY '25 will bring some relief to this situation if we stick to the current staffing plan that the previous board adopted.
Mhm.
We believe, I mean, it's just imperative that we have to stick to that staffing plan if we want to continue to deliver the service at the level that we've been delivering for the past several decades. Anybody else want to talk about anything else with FY '24?
Just to reiterate what Rick said, is that next year, those final 7 stations, the end product is exactly what the volunteers are providing currently, plus an engine driver for a little bit longer during the day, for a 24-hour period instead of 10 hours a day. It really just taking and replacing what's currently in place. And to regress from that would, I say this all the time, is that the director, chief's done a good job of staying community focused. We've stayed, we're telling our communities that we're going to keep the service that you're used to in place. And after the hiring next year, that is exactly what we did. We kept that promise and kept, the level of service that they were accustomed to. And it's a very community-focused plan. And I think it's pretty modest plan, but it replaces what's currently in place. They're getting it already.
I think one of the things we have to look at and we have to remember too is, this is an iterative process. As we discussed on the 8th, kind of the perspective with the new hires, the fact that you're coming in, and if you go to any other department around us, the leaders of those departments, everyone who works there was handed something when they walked in the door. Something was established before them. We're walking the plank. We're establishing this in its base level as we go forward with the Department of Fire and EMS, and that comes down to us. This morning discussing around the dinner or the day room table the policies. Discussing the intricacies there and what questions people had and what concerns, because that ultimately is going to lead to the feedback coming up. I think also when we look at the staffing, we have to look at our vulnerabilities at the same time. We have that, I guess, the translation of what the service was before, but we already looked at the vulnerabilities in the EMS service with the chase cars, some of those things, some of the supervision on the base level. But we also have to realize that, especially in the area of supervision or some of those other places the data is going to point us, we have to look at the requirements, where we go from here and where the system's going to reflect in the future. The service is obviously the priority and the target for us. In the course of that service, we have to look at the requirements of effective supervision and what that means for the delivery of services. And the quality of those services and ultimately retaining those employees, because we don't have massive issues that erupt into more staffing issues because we have people that are getting laid off or fired for that matter. Because this is a new venture, just like any other aspects of this department. The employee and personnel management now that is in the county hands, and as the supervisors and the shift commanders and everything else, it's something that we're already looking at now. And, this is my second shift on the floor with my shift. But it's obviously something that we're going to have to prioritize moving forward as well.
That's a good segue into what I want to talk about FY25.
I was reading your mind.
All right. So FY25 in the out years, they're going to bring additional challenges. At the end of FY25, Chief Robinson will have approximately 230, 240 people, career people that will be under his command. That's not counting the volunteers that are out there that are going to need the same care and feeding. We're talking about managing a department of over 1,000 people that will need support in the form of administrative duties, in the form of operational duties, as Lieutenant Karolika was just talking about, as well as training. Chief Robinson will have to grow his staff in order to support this, in order to manage. He can't continue to do it with 5 people. It's just feasibly impossible to do that. He'll have to have some type of command staff. He'll have to have some type of administrative staff. But where in the past that the 14 departments, with the help of Visa, were managing their own people independently. Now we have a department of fire and EMS that the volunteers are a part of. And most of these guys the chief mentioned that are currently working in these metropolitan fire departments or municipality fire departments or federal fire departments all feel those same pains. So those things we need to talk about, and that's one of the things that's in the strategic plan that that Danny Plunkett and his group will be looking at, talking about what does this support look like. FY25 and beyond, we continue to bring hiring challenges that we're seeing in Carroll County and across the state and country. The Chief already mentioned this a little bit. We may need to look at different hiring models. I mean, right now we're hiring, train people to meet these qualifications that the Chief has set out. At what point do we start the transition where we start training citizens and civilians right off the street to be firefighters and EMTs? And if we do that, then we're going to need people. There's going to be the trainers to train the personnel, as well as we're still going to, if we're taking those trainers off of the street, then we have to have people there to backfill those folks that are taking off the street to fill those positions. This will cost money in training time as well as training staff. There's other models out there that you could look at where we try to send people to another jurisdiction and use their academy, but then we still have to send people, and we're still having to pay those people to sit there and go and do that. Chief, anything else you want to add to that? Or?
And my mandate, as I tell people, was to come in and we had 3 FY year plan, and that was essentially to staff EMS, provide 1 driver to a station. I think what the data analytics will show us beyond that, and we'll have it even though it's not part of our direction, is what will be the impact on fire staffing. If we look again at the national perspectives of this, the companies are getting busier. We have some of our stations that are running fire calls over 10 calls a day, and to ask a volunteer to get up from home and come to a station 10 times for the same alarm going off or the same elevator stuck, and worse yet, we know for a fact that volunteers are not coming out for medical calls. We run a cardiac arrest. The national standard requires us to have 5 people there to work the cardiac arrest. So we now have a chase car that's getting a second paramedic there. We have a medic unit, and it's hit or miss who else is coming to assist. We can't successfully save lives unless we have the right number of people to do that multitasking on medical calls. And then beyond that, we have fire calls. We've changed the paradigm in that right now, if you were to get a fire in Westminster, 6 medic units go out of service for an hour because they put their ambulances down, they jump on fire engines because there may or may not be volunteer staffing. So we're really putting additional burdens on the volunteers, and we really can't statistically tell you and validate that they are or are they not showing up. But theoretically, we're probably going to find gaps in staffing for fire equipment, and we can't rob EMS to make up for that. So our new policy is, I'll take the city of Westminster, for example. Westminster gets a fire call. They're used to taking both their ambulances out and running their ladder tower and their engine. No longer will that be the case. One ambulance can take one person, put them on the fire engine, that ambulance follows. So as soon as the emergency is cleared, the paramedic gets back on the ambulance. The second ambulance in Westminster will not respond and go out of service, nor will Pleasant Valley, New Windsor, Reese, and all these other companies. So that means, and I'm going to be the guy in the hot seat for it, that when you get that fire in Westminster, 5 or 6 companies are going to be what they call understaffed, or they're going to scratch altogether. And so I'm making the decision based on the guidance that I received from the last Board of Commissioners and the whole plan, that that's what we're going to do. And there's going to be some unhappy people with that. And bottom line is, statistically, we know that if it's an actual fire, the volunteers do come, maybe not right away, but within 10 minutes, we're going to get a significant amount of volunteer staffing. So we need to do what we can to support those companies so those people are still coming out. We're still supplying what they need in terms of equipment, in terms of, we're providing the fuel and everything else, but at the same time, to replace a fire engine now is $1 million, and we're now looking at a 3-year delivery time. So the value of what the volunteers are doing, whether, good, bad, or indifferent, whoever's looking at it, is about $250 million a year. And that's an infrastructure that we could never begin to replace. So we have to work in a partnership going forward. And the question will be as to what degree that partnership can be enhanced. And those are questions that we can't really answer today. We're going to have to look at our data. We can make some predictions based on what we do know, but it is going to incur some expenses, and we understand that revenues aren't growing, and all of us are doing 5 or 6 different jobs, changing hats all day long. We're going to calls, we're doing the administrative things, and we're asking our people who are on duty, they're going to be doing a lot more tasks in the future. There's some areas that we haven't even scratched the surface on. We just took over plans review under the fire department, which is kind of setting a foundation for a future where we may look at a fire marshal's capability, but we can throw that burden on our stations and do in-service inspections, create additional revenue. There's a lot of out-of-the-box things we can look at, but we've got to do, number one, what's most cost-effective for Carroll County, what could be funded, and how much we can maximize our people. We don't want to get to the point where our tasking is so significant that we can't do it effectively. So those are our challenges, and we have to work as a team, and ESAC is certainly going to be a big part of that to help us look at the metrics and to quantify what we're doing, what we can do better, and what we just simply can't do. And we have to understand that we're not some of those surrounding jurisdictions with, limitless revenues, and that our growth is going to be somewhat constrained. And so we have to get the most that we can in terms of value-added type things. And,
Yeah. So, I agree with a lot of what you're sharing, and you're absolutely right. We are not like other jurisdictions and communities that have increased their revenue. We haven't. It comes down to recruit, train, and retain, and figuring out, okay, where are we putting the resources to establish the recruit, train, and retain, looking at those 3 pipelines. Because you mentioned train a few times, is there a regional training facility like our sheriff's department conducts regional training for everyone from Garrett County to,
yes. We have Maryland Fire Rescue Institute, which their director, Michael Cox.
I do.
So Maryland Fire Rescue Institute, by state mandate, is funded, and it's funded under the Emergency Services funding that pays for shock trauma, the helicopters. MIFRE is one of those components, so
So are we allowed to use
we do
them
currently,
and bring some of the folks that we're recruiting
yes.
through their training program?
Yes, so right
So-
now, all of our classes for new
We
volunteers.
pay.
But you still have to pay them, yeah.
So, so I apologize. So is the cost the same amount as if we were doing it ourselves, or is it less?
It's a lot less.
It's a lot
So
less.
Commissioner, are you talking about an academy scenario where
Yeah.
we're training new recruits for the, so that, I think, you know, there's obviously two lines. One is the volunteer capacity, right? And so MIFRE is a big facilitator of that. You know, that's really where we get our training from. It's pretty cost effective on that side to be able to bring those through. There's some nuances to how funding flows through that and some of those aspects. As far as the career side goes, if we were going to start going down the avenue of hiring untrained people and then moving them through a recruit class and then moving them out to the floor after that. You know, there are different options on how we would do that. There are departments that, for instance, BWI in Annapolis partner with Anne Arundel County in their academy.
Yep.
You know, obviously there's, on top of paying the employee when they're going through, there's also, you're essentially sending, typically the agreement is that you would send a trainer with that employee. So you're also sending another one of our more experienced, you know, instructors or of sort to go with them into that academy as a representative of your department to that academy as they go through. You know, I'm sure the director, the chief could talk more about some of the, you know, the intricacies of that because of
Yeah.
that. But ultimately, you know, I think the end goal would be standing up, just as the sheriff's office has, our own resources over time. You know, right now we're looking at something like 40, like, you know, we're okay right now. Like July, when we get there, we're looking at up almost 40 vacancies even in that moment. We're going to have a significant recruitment issue moving forward in terms of volume, and I think it'd be difficult to start looking at the other jurisdictions and saying, hey, we're not talking about one or two, we're talking about 30 at a time. That's their whole academy class at times. They're budding through 30 people. So, you know, it's logistically, it's definitely a concern on that side, and it's a burden, but you know, obviously we have to think outside the box. Carol already does a lot with very little in terms of fire and EMS, and obviously we have to be creative.
So to run a full-time academy, if we just use 20 as an example, if we hire 20 people, number one, the instructors all have to be state licensed instructors. So for every 5 people, because most of it's going to be practical training, you need 1 instructor. So that would be a minimum of 5 FTEs, at least 1 administrative person, so that's 6 FTEs. And if you figure an average cost of $100,000 plus, that's just to get the instructors in. Then once we hire the people, we're looking at minimum of 20 weeks. So that's 20 weeks we're paying people as full-time employees with benefits, but we're not yielding any return on them because they're in training. Then on top of that, you're going to lose 20% of the people. So I would say personally, and having been assigned as in charge of training in another jurisdiction for 16 years, it's not cost effective right now with the current model we're using for hiring to run our own academy. It's certainly a goal, but with our state qualification system that's in place, there are hundreds, if not thousands of people each year and more people coming into the system. And what it allows us to do is the ability to hire our own Carroll County grown people into that. And we're going to have to look at what we did the other day was 8 hours. People are doing a lot of OJT field orientation. We may have to look at a week of, we hire people on a Thursday, we hold them for a week before they get assigned, because right now we have medic units that are down because the medics can't be released. They've got to get some experience in the Carroll County system. So for right now, I would, me personally speaking, our model for hiring is probably the best, most effective model we can use. Moving forward, the time is going to come where citizens are going to ask, well, I haven't been a volunteer, I'm looking for a career, why can't I be part of the Carroll County Fire and EMS?
And I'm not promoting establishing an academy.
Right.
All I'm asking is, are there available academies or regional
Yes,
approaches?
and we
That's
could
it.
easily,
So,
between, we right now have at our disposal, we could use Montgomery, we could use Frederick, we could use Baltimore
Okay.
County,
Yeah.
Harrod County.
Yep.
It'd just be a matter of assigning people
Right.
there, and
Okay.
probably at no cost. maybe
Lastly on
Yeah.
that, there also has been discussion, mostly spearheaded by Chief Donlin out of Manchester. We have that EST program that the high schoolers take.
Yeah.
And there's been repeated discussions as to how do we latch on to these young people? Because basically they're coming out of it a fully trained firefighter EMT. And how do we create a segue into county employment? And it's, the devil's in the details, but there is possibly an opportunity to, offer these county residents, county high schoolers, a segue into a sustainable, good, well-paying career with benefits. And how do we, the devil's in the details. Obviously, you have to assign personnel to manage that as well, but you're talking anywhere from 8 to 12 young people every year that may or may not be interested in remaining in Carroll County, live, work, continue to stay.
Good point.
So our EST program is actually doing pretty well right now.
Yeah.
We already have young people that have registered to come into it this fall, which we're very excited about. And these are individuals that are both interested in doing it as a volunteer and interested in doing it as a career. And that is something that we need to maintain for both sides. We need to have the volunteers because, as one of the things that Director Robinson said, is you're not in a position, unfortunately, to man every fire department right now as it stands with engines and squads and such the like. The initial goal of this whole plan was to put EMS on the streets because of the bedroom community that we are now facing as volunteers. And years ago, if you had a call and you were employed in Carroll County, they let you go on the call because they understood the infrastructure of what the volunteers were doing for the community. And we have to remember that we're still going to be here and we're going to work together as a team, but the EST program is very strong, and we want to promote that as much as we can for the young people. And it's really tough because young people these days are very short-term oriented. What is it that I can do now? And you explain to them that you have to go through this training that we do offer through MIFRE. In other words, if a volunteer comes in, we take them to a MIFRE course and they learn how to do whichever fire or EMS. And so those opportunities are there. And I agree with you that we're not really in a position to have our own training academy at this point.
Okay.
So we've talked a lot about employees and recruiting and retaining our employees, but I want to talk a little bit about retaining and recruiting our volunteers. We had a program a few boards ago where monetary incentives were provided for tuition reimbursements, driver's license renewals, especially for CDLs, top responders, just to name a few of the things that they were all looking at. We have to look at different options to keep the younger writing members around. And I think anything that we can do monetarily, and I think tuition reimbursement is a huge one, not just if a person is looking at a fire service career and wants to be, get a degree is to be, sort of emergency medicine or fire science, but any degree that these young people want to get. In this program that we had, and I'll speak for my own department at Mount Airy, we had folks that were going to school out of state that would come home on weekends in their breaks so that they could continue to get their LoSAP points in order to be eligible to get this tuition money. And it did help. It helped them and it helped the department. LoSAP is a wonderful program that we've had in the state, and we take great pride that it was started in the state by Carroll County. But there's other jurisdictions around the country that are beginning to look at other things that they can look at is to provide their volunteers. And some of them come in the form of property tax breaks. Some of them come as payroll tax breaks. Or I should say income tax breaks. So those are some of the things that did it. The state of New York just, has passed a huge one for property tax breaks. For volunteer firefighters. But there's things there that we need to talk about, and I think that's a great topic to be talked about down at Mako, is on how to retain some of the volunteers.
Is that going to be discussed And I appreciate the points. Is that going to be discussed or brought up in your sessions at MACO?
Yes, we'll look at volunteers. It's primarily going to be looking at career recruitment and retention, but I know the state summer study is at both, and we'll
Okay.
be looking at all those programs out there. And
Definitely keep us apprised, especially while we're down there, if available, to either participate or to get some of the
Yeah.
immediate feedback on what's obtained from,
And tomorrow, we're meeting with the
communities.
Metro Chiefs over
Okay.
in Howard County, and that's on our topics of discussion.
okay, great.
Because everybody's having the same issue that we're having
Yep.
right now, getting people that want to come work. It's everywhere. And, you know, only 3 or 4 years ago, pre-COVID, I mean, departments like Baltimore County would have 5,000 people apply. You know, Howard and Frederick would have to cut theirs off after
Yep.
so many people. But it's suddenly done a 360, and we're not sure why. It can't all be just COVID. As I
Right.
think there's some societal changes that have occurred. And for whatever reason, people are not being drawn to the public safety professions as historically they have been. I mean, law enforcement's even having a greater difficulty.
Yeah, and I'm having a MACO board meeting Thursday and Friday. So this I can bring up on Friday, so good point.
So I know we're getting a little over our hour, but I wanted to talk about marketing. And marketing might not be the proper word to use for this new combination department, but this is an observation that I wanted to share with the commissioners. When I read the paper, I see the county is putting people in stations, buying vehicles and equipment for the fire department. I know what that means because I'm intimately involved in this whole process. But if a citizen reads this who does not have the background that we do, I equate vehicles to engines, ladder trucks, rescue squads, tankers, all those things that we're not buying, or the county, when I say we, the collective we, the county government is not buying. And with this being prime fundraising season for the volunteers, someone might ask, why am I have to go to this carnival anymore to support this carnival if the county's buying all this stuff? I'm paying taxes for all this. So I'm not throwing stones or placing blame at anyone. I'm just saying that this is another one of those things that we're learning curve things that we need to address. And we need to do a better job, we, a collective we, of informing the public on how this fire department is a unicorn in county government. You know, where we have such a partnership between the volunteer corporations footing millions of dollars into this effort, along with county government. So I think we need to do a better job on how we're talking about and building this department, because we don't want to sacrifice all the good things that have happened in the past 200 years.
We are seeing departments that are seeing financial reductions in their carnivals. I mean, it is happening.
Oh, absolutely.
And whether or not it's because the economy is the way it is, or whether or not it's because they are appreciating, they're thinking, well, they don't need the money anymore or whatever, I'm not sure what it is, and it could be a combination of both. And I do think that it's really important that, in fact, when Rick and I were talking this morning, I said that that's something that CC Visa is really appreciating, is that one of the things we need to push forward is, you were talking earlier, is how do you put the priorities?
Mhm.
Well, suddenly the recruitment and retention group has gone to the top of the heap right
Mhm.
now. And we need to make it clear to people that being a volunteer is very special. And
Mhm.
it is something that should be appreciated on so many different levels. And we need to make not just the young people, but the old people realize what it means. I mean, Director Robinson's done a really good job. I mean, when we were doing the Public Safety Awards, he and I both, I think we beat every meeting we ever attended on making sure that you put people in for the awards so that you make people aware of what's going on. One of the things that I have found, though, in my years as a volunteer is that that's not why we're here. If you ask somebody why they're a volunteer, it's not to get awards, it's not to be recognized. In fact, they really don't want to be recognized. They just want to serve their community. And to try to push them out into the public sometimes, it's like, I don't want to be there. But in the same respect, the community as a whole, the citizens of this county, have to understand what it's like and what is necessary to keep it going.
When we talk about the fire department budget, we believe that the contribution that the volunteer corporations bring to the table is also noted. It's great that when we look at the county government book and it says in there $28 million are put aside for fire and EMS. But what about all of the loans that the volunteer corporations have for buildings and equipment and things like that we need to, I think, make folks aware that these are things that are still have to be paid for, that are being paid for outside of county government. So I don't know, and I'm glad Ted's in the room too, so I don't know if there's some way that we can include some of that information into, we just specifically, not necessarily if we have to create a separate budget book just for the fire department, but I believe that there should be some kind of recommendations made in there, or not recommendations, or acknowledgement, yeah, that this thing is costing a whole lot more money, but is being paid for without tax dollars.
Basically, you're saying just a better way to communicate to the community the entirety of
Right,
fire EMS.
right.
Okay.
And do you have
Yeah.
all the facts you need to tell people? Are they calculating volunteer hours and number of volunteers? I know they do calls and hours, and there's some of that stuff, but, I mean, I see it with Rec and Parks. There, you know, we have 10,000 volunteers and 700,000 hours, and that would cost this, and something globally, not maybe each, because like you say, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it's just like Rec and Parks, we can't afford to replace all them with paid people.
Right.
Maybe someday, but.
No, maybe this is something that the chief can put in his annual
And
report.
there was a press release that Chris Weinbrenner sent out last week under the name of the commissioners, which explained what the carnivals were all about and talked about supporting them, and it was very well done, to the extent that the question becomes is who's reading that. And one of the things, when I was an active volunteer at my carnival, we would actually have a public information booth that would show this is the cost of goods and services, this is what we're doing, this is.
I think a dunking booth with you in it, that would make big PR.
They'd make a fortune this week anyhow. It's, next week maybe even more.
And you make the target as big as you can, so. No, but I think, you know, understanding that communicating is through Chris Weinbrenner, is through the newspaper, is through social media, is through many different ways. You know, the Veterans Advisory Council does a very good job with our citizen services. Every month, they share a packet saying this is the millions of dollars that our veterans have been saved money through the process annually and, you know, from its beginnings. It talks about the different volumes of calls and different metrics that it uses. I think something similar can be done. You know, don't reinvent the wheel of things that have already been done, but also, you know, I've said don't try to boil the ocean, you'll never get there. A little bit at a time. And how do you communicate it? Maybe through Chris Weinbrenner, and then maybe 2 things and maybe 3 things, just so the community becomes more aware of the value of the total fire department. It's not this or that, it's this and that. And that's kind of where you're going, so. Okay.
And how do you get people to see it? Because, you know, you guys know veterans, we all know different things, but, you know, they used to say Carroll County Times was 30% of the people. I don't even know if it's that anymore.
So when
we all feel mixed feelings about social media, what you do and what you don't do there, but I don't know how you get people to see it.
Right.
So one of the ways that I go about trying to disseminate information is whenever I have a town hall or whenever I'm out and about, I always carry around two things with me. One of them is a list of things that the Board of Commissioners has accomplished or are working on, and the other thing Chief Robinson and his staff put together for me about the Department of Fire and Emergency Services. And that also includes a lot of information on there about what the volunteers do and how important they are to the overall public safety aspect of the county. And I think that, as Commissioner Rothstein said, talking about boiling an ocean, maybe approaching this in a step-by-step fashion and making sure all commissioners have something like this on hand, whether it's sharing it even through social media or on the website. You're never going to be able to get every single 108 member of the 180,000 people who live here, but you can, hit them step by step. When I was on the city council in Tawnytown, I used to try to attend every single night of the volunteer fire company carnival. And even now, I do my best to get to all of them in District 1. And I try to explain to people that this is the lifeblood of the volunteer companies, that there's a lot that they do that the county cannot do. And only through that cooperation between the volunteer and the career are we able to provide the service that our citizens deserve. And so I think that if any of us were to have something like this, or maybe something created for all of us together that we could have on hand or we could share on social media, would be beneficial.
And even part of our podcast.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll work towards that.
That would be another way.
Okay.
Last couple things, the adequate facilities document, now that we've created the Department of Fire and EMS, the thing needs to be updated. There's a lot of, we're changing things in right now with how the fire department is operating as far as response times that don't agree with what's in that adequate facilities document. Again, this is where data plays into a lot of things
Right.
too, that we need to look at, but that adequate facilities document really needs to be updated. Since it has been since October, since we met, and we're right in the prime season of this whole transition to this department, I would love to see us meet quarterly, if it's possible. Just so you're hearing it from the citizens across the fire department, and employees and volunteers, so that you guys are up to date on what's going on and hearing it from, like you said before, Commissioner Rothstein, the folks that are doing this stuff on a daily basis. So if your permission, I'd like to set this up for quarterly meetings if we can do it, if your schedule's as close to quarterly as we can.
Yeah, it definitely, it's not mine, but it's ours, and I think there wouldn't be an objection to doing something quarterly.
Yeah, no, not at all. During open session
Yeah.
for 30
Okay.
minutes. I mean, I don't know if we.
Yeah, and that would be fine
Yeah,
too.
sure, absolutely. Let's go
Sounds
do
good.
that.
So we'll start scheduling that.
So
Okay.
that's all I had on my list of things and topics that we have been discussing at ESAC over the past several months. I didn't know if any other members said anything that they want to say in closing.
I'd like to start, Lynn started the meeting by just announcing, I don't know if y'all heard that, but this may be your last official.
She's coming the 28th.
You come the 28th? So that'll be your last official, but she has been a trusted public servant to this county for how many years now?
Several.
Several. But I just want to acknowledge her.
We can find leg irons if you want,
Yeah. We're actually going to miss her because she did speak our language on day one.
Thank you.
And it was very helpful to have someone that understood.
Steve Wance insisted upon it,
Uh,
actually.
you-
Way
you
back in
were-
the day, he's the one
We're an
that,
absolute asset.
When he had hair?
To the group.
When he had hair?
when he had hair. I didn't
Just-
say that.
I just wanted to acknowledge Lynn's
Thank you.
participation. and
Really
service to the
appreciate that.
county, and, just
And
worth
that-
noting.
And I kind of read minds today, not just because I'm stationed in his firehouse, but Eddie Rook, Chief 12, has been an awesome asset and a great partner through this whole thing. I mean, we talk about collaboration, and I can tell you now, not only just working with him in these aspects, but being in his firehouse, I think that it is an example of how combination firehouses should work, not just in Carroll, but broadly. He's been an awesome asset to this whole thing. I know he's kind of had to step back and prioritize family. I've told him how displeased I am in that, although I understand it. But just like to really thank him for all the time he had. And then at the same time, in open kind of forum, was welcome Woody, Chief 9, into the mix as well, and he's going to have to buckle up and get through this with us too. But it's been an awesome collaborative effort through this whole thing, and we need to maintain that perspective through the whole
And
process.
as I was selling my French fries with the Lions Club, I saw Chief walking around with the kids. So, yes, he is a great asset to the community. So
Yes, sir.
I appreciate those comments. Anything else, gentlemen? No? Anything from,
Thank you, guys.
That's
It's been good.
I just want to thank ESAC for what they've done, and I've tried to be as collaborative as possible and include them. Rick and I meet offline probably once every 2 weeks, and we're going to probably expand that and try to get, Susan's going to be having a meeting with me on a regular basis. And again, this isn't, people misconstrue some things. This isn't about me, it's about us. And we have to continue to be a team. Somebody's got to steer every now and then, but I need the input and the feedback. And I can say that everybody on the ESAC, including civilian members, they haven't been shy about anything. They hold me to the fire, and that's what we need to do to make things go forward.
no, Chief, really appreciate it. Gentlemen? Okay, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, absolutely.